Now, there are a lot of things the Soulsborne games get praised for, and quite rightly so. Things like the quality of the combat, the fascinating lore, the memorable enemy art designs and animations, the legendary soundtracks from the quiet, sombre tones of Gwyn's theme to the dramatic, orchestral crescendos of Ludwig's theme, and much, much more. There's a lot to praise because, simply put, these games are sick, through and through, but perhaps one of the most highly praised aspects of the Soulsborne catalogue has to be their levels, both their design and their aesthetics and atmosphere. Now, I'm no game design graduate or expert or high-level gameplay analyst, I'm just some random dude from Scotland. But regardless, I know when I like something and when I don't, and I can usually tell you why, which brings us to today's list. As a follow-up to my previous video in the series where I named my favourite and least favourite bosses in the Soulsborne games, I am returned with another list of my favourite and least favourite levels from every game. Got to get the mandatory preamble out of the way here, I guess, but I must stress that these are simply my favourite and least favourite levels from each game. I'm not saying any of them are definitively bad, and for a couple of my least favourite selections it's just a case of me not liking them quite as much as the other levels, rather than me disliking them. As for my selection criteria, it's pretty simple. It's entirely based on how much I personally do or don't enjoy playing through that level. Level layout, pacing, difficulty, sure, all that matters, but sometimes an area will just have that certain special something that you can't quite put your finger on that makes you look forward to playing through it. Before I get started, if you like the video and want to see more amusing content in the future, and maybe even more of these types of vids, if I can think of anything else to rank, then maybe you can even subscribe. And lastly, I shall give a fond thank you to my kind patrons for their steadfast support for my channel. And with that being said, let's kick off with the first game in the series, Demon's Souls. Demon's Souls was the game to kick off a glorious new age, an age of tight mechanics and intricate level design which would go on to be iterated and expanded on in the subsequent Soulsborne games and imitated by all manner of Souls-likes. It certainly seems to be agreed by a lot of Souls fans that this first game had perhaps the darkest and most distinctive atmosphere in the series, and after playing through the Tower of Latria and the Valley of Defilement, you can see what they mean. However, as notoriously intricate as levels like 3-1 are, not to mention the dizzying verticality of 2-2, my favourite pick simply has to go to 1-3, Boletaria Inner Ward. The thing about me is that I'm a goddamn sucker for a good castle type level, with infantry and fearsome knights and whatnot, and as such, the most enjoyable world in Demon's Souls for me is always Boletaria, all 4 of its levels. I actually came close to picking 1-2, the Lord's Path, due to the sheer spectacle of the stalking dragon throughout the entire level, and the fact that they managed to make the bridge so enjoyable to traverse through despite being very linear, but 1-3 ended up winning out, being much more expansive and challenging, having an excellent variety of enemies, and featuring that legendary stairs section with the 3 red-eyed knights, a feature FromSoft would go on to recreate in Lothric Castle in Dark Souls 3. The Red-Eyed Knights in particular go a long way towards making the Inner Ward so special. Of course, you encounter one of these terrifying sentinels back in the very first level, so you've got very little chance of coming out on top in that particular encounter. And then you've got the weaker blue-eyed variants, also in 1-1 and 1-2. But in 1-3, the challenge is ramped way the hell up, to the point where the game doesn't even let you progress past the Tower Knight boss room until you've beaten at least one archdemon elsewhere, as if to say, dude, we're not even going to let you try to beat this level yet. Y'all don't want none of this. And the Penetrator boss at the end of 1-3 is this sweet cherry on the cake, being one of the better bosses in the game and taking you one step closer to facing False King Allant. Great level with some super memorable moments, and I always look forward to playing through it. For my least favourite level, well, I'm not entirely sure how people will take this, but I don't like playing through the Valley of Defilement, and in particular 5-2, the Swamp of Sorrow. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, and actually the most recent time I played through the level, when I was putting together my retrospective of the game, I came away with a greater respect for its design, aesthetics, and general filthy vibe. However, I still just don't like playing through it, to the point where the Valley of Defilement is the archstone I almost always leave to last on any fresh Demon Souls playthrough. Most of the level is composed of a thick swamp of literal shit, which heavily restricts mobility, though mercifully, Bluepoint did add in a new ring to the game which wasn't there in the original, which does help with this. Furthermore, you've got these disgusting fly things constantly buzzing around and hounding you. The part towards the end before the hovels can be confusing as hell to navigate, and if you fall off at the wrong part of the level or get pushed off, then have fun going through the whole swamp all over again. Honestly though, layout aside for a second, it's mainly the miserable wet atmosphere of this level that gets to me. In a sense, I think it was a complete success, in that I think FromSoft, then Bluepoint, achieved exactly what they set out to achieve here, to make the most disgusting, hopeless level they could think of, and I respect that, but the upside is that I don't really enjoy it. It's not a bad level, it's just one that I don't vibe with all that much. Whereas the world of Demon Souls was fragmented, being divided into distinct archstones and stages with no real degree of interconnectivity, the world of Dark Souls would be much larger and more coherent, though mind you, there were still disconnected parts of it, which were only accessible via a loading screen, like the Undead Asylum, the DLC stuff, the Painted World and Anor Londo, and the latter location there happens to be my pick for favourite Dark Souls level. I remember back in the early days, when I was many hours into Dark Souls but still floundering and struggling in places like the Undead Parish, the Depths, and Blighttown, having a brutally great time, sure, but also assuming that I had a pretty decent idea of what the game had to offer by this point. And then, one day, whilst looking up something Dark Souls related on YouTube, probably desperately seeking tips on some boss that was ruining my day, probably the Capra Demon, or should I say the Crapra Demon, I remember a thumbnail catching my eye, showing some beautiful, bright, pristine environment with bridges and elevators and a stunning castle. I thought, when the hell do I get to this place? That looks awesome. And when I eventually did get there after conquering the death trap dungeon that is Sen's fortress, turns out it was very much awesome, to say the least. The game takes an aesthetic shift here, feeling so much grander in scale as you traverse the very realm and castle of Lord Gwyn and his progeny. Right off the bat you're faced with these imposing giant sentinels, just standing guard unless approached, whereupon prepare to be slashed and smitten with halberd and shield. And then you've got the nearby sealed entrance to the Duke's archives, making you wonder what the hell's in there. As incredible as Anor Londo looks and feels to traverse through, I really do think it's the enemies which make it. Certainly the aforementioned giant sentinels, but in particular the Silver Knights, still standing guard at various points throughout the castle, and always a sheer pleasure to fight. Well, mostly a pleasure. I'm not really a big parry enthusiast, being kinda crappy at it, but when in Anor Londo, I can't not bust out my buckler and start parrying some Silver Knights. Their slow, weighty thrusts and slashes simply demand it. I'm not saying that Anor Londo has the tightest level structure with the most satisfying traversal in the game, because I guess places like the Painted World and even the Undead Burg have it beaten in that regard, but the sheer gigantic glory of the location always makes me look forward to getting there. And then there's the level's notorious boss fight with Ornstein and Smo, and then the partially secret boss with Gwyndolin, and let's not forget the sheer pleasure of making the acquaintance of the giant blacksmith. May he live a long and fruitful life. No! But for as golden and glorious as Anor Londo is, these qualities are inversely matched by Lost Izalith, which in comparison is plain goofy and sloppy, not to mention being sandwiched in between two of my least favourite bosses in the game, the Centipede Demon and Bed of Chaos. A lot of folk talk about how much less tight and polished the second half of Dark Souls is compared to the first, and while I agree with this, I don't think the second half is bad, it's just not as good as the first. But parts of Lost Izalith really are downright bad. The single worst feature of the level is surely the eye-scorchingly bright lava which you have to walk on to get through the level, with the help of the orange charred ring from the previous boss fight, and this mechanic sucks. The way you constantly take tiny slivers of chip damage with that same burning animation and sound effect playing all the way. It looks and sounds really bad, and it's just not fun to play through. Nothing about traversing through this area feels in any way gratifying if I have to constantly take damage while moving through it. The absurd number of dragon arses littering the place are responsible for the whole goofy aspect of the level, though I have to confess, despite how dumb this enemy is and how sloppily they've been strewn about the place in such excessive number, I do kind of like them. The way they can jump absurdly high into the air, it's kind of terrifying. Things do get a bit less chaotic further on in the level, I guess, when you leave the lava behind, but even then the game has you fight tons of these utterly uninteresting demon fire sage statue things, though I do have a soft spot for the Chaos Eaters. Apparently these things have a 0.3% chance of dropping a red Titanite slab too, though I've never gotten one. Anyone else? Also, if you're after a decent supply of Demon Titanite, you're going to need to make the journey through the second half of Lost Izalith a whole lot to fight the Titanite demon there, which despite how awesome it looks, has some of the worst hitboxes in the game. I don't hate Lost Izalith or anything, but it is Dark Souls at its weakest, which is why it gets this spot. Whilst each level in Dark Souls has its own strong identity and presence, even the not so great ones, I can't quite say the same for Dark Souls 2. For one, there are far more levels in this game, and to be honest, they can just get a bit bland and uninteresting, like Huntsman's Copse and the Shaded Woods. Even so, there are plenty of good areas here too, and even some excellent ones, particularly in the 3 DLCs, which are often praised for featuring big upgrades in level design compared to in the base game. Then you've got the Scholar of the First Sin version of the game, which really did change how the levels felt by rearranging item placements and enemy placements, though sadly these changes were often not for the better, often simply being arbitrary changes rather than actual improvements. My pick for favourite Dark Souls 2 level might surprise some people because it's not strictly a great level, I just really like it, and that level is Hyde's Tower of Flame, probably the prettiest level in the game, though there are certainly some other stunning ones like the Shrine of Amana and the Dragon Eyrie, not to mention some absolute stinkers like the Shaded Woods and Harvest Valley, which I just find unpleasant to look at and play through. Although it can be accessed very early on directly from Majula, the Tower of Flame is actually an optional area, leading directly on to No Man's Wharf, which is itself an optional area which acts as an alternate means of getting to the Lost Bastille. Despite how easily accessible it is, this can be a very hard area, particularly if tackled at too low a level, and I think it's meant as some place where you're supposed to nervously venture forth into, get hammered or greatsworded by one of these huge old knights and think, maybe I'll come back later. I do really like the mechanic where the levers arise out of the ground upon defeating the enemies there, making more of the level accessible and even decreasing the challenge of the Dragon Rider fight a bit by making the arena less perilous. Both bosses do play a big part in why I enjoy the Tower of Flame, because while neither are really very difficult, they are enjoyable, and anyone who watched my previous video in the series knows I like fighting bosses. One unfortunate aspect, however, is what the Scholar of the First Sin did to my precious Tower of Flame, because getting through here kinda sucks in that version, because they went and put a big dragon on the platform leading to the old Dragon Rider boss, and I still don't really understand how you're supposed to get past this thing without a bow. Super frustrating to fight. Furthermore, now when you beat one of the 2 level bosses, all the previously dormant Hyde Knights wake up and actively start moving towards you, often resulting in a messy, unpleasant shitshow of a gameplay experience. Despite all the confusion that Scholar of the First Sin introduced, I still love the Tower of Flame on some higher level that transcends arguments of clever, expansive level layouts. I guess I'm just a sucker for a nice view. And castles. But I'll tell you a level which does not feature many nice views, and that's Brightstone Cove, Seldora. I have a bit of a weird mental quirk when it comes to Dark Souls 2. See, structurally it has similarities to the first game, with the 4 great souls who you need to venture out and defeat, except whenever I think about these 4 major bosses, I always struggle to remember one in particular. Same with the levels leading up to it, because they're boring as fuck and I don't like them. I'm talking about Brightstone Cove, Seldora, which leads to the Duke's Dear Freya. It's just such a bland area with bland enemies, and getting through it all was just so bloody bland and meh. When I reached that first part with the falconers and the dumb piggies, I can't help but sigh and think, great, gotta do this level now. Then there's that horrible vertical section with the magic homing projectiles, and then the spidery bit with all the spidery spiders. I'm getting bored just talking about this level, and even its name sucks. Brightstone Cove Seldora. Ugh. And I'm really not a fan of the Shaded Woods level either, with those lame, out of place lion enemies. I also considered putting Earthen Peak here due to my detestation for the headless marionette things there, but at least that level made me feel something. At least it still engaged my emotions. On to the next game. So, you know how I mentioned before that I'm partial as hell to a good castle, and hey, if there's a dragon around, all the better. Well, I had to have a damn good think about what to put here for Dark Souls 3, even more than with the other games on this list, because I really freaking love Dark Souls 3, and I love lots of its levels, especially the DLC ones. The Ring City is one of the most darkly emotional locations I've ever explored in a game. However, with me being a castle freak, a castle gimp, deep in my heart of hearts, I knew what the answer was. Lothric Castle, complete with fierce infantry, fearsome knights, and a good old-fashioned dragon bridge, harkening back to the demon days of yore. Dark Souls 3 is the most moody and apocalyptic of all the Souls games, being the final game in the series and centering around the futility of continuously linking then relinking the fire, all while the world turns ever more to ash, and I felt these apocalyptic tones especially intensely when I reached Lothric Castle, with the bizarre pilgrim butterflies climbing higher into the dead red sky, while you're set upon by half-dead, hollowed infantry, and even the warped and possessed armour of Dragonslayer Ornstein. The Lothric Knights in particular make for some of the toughest knights in the Dark Souls trilogy, especially the multitude of lance and greatsword wielding ones stalking the stairs leading up to Prince Lothric's chambers. And then you have the terrifying Winged Knights, now actually possessing proper wings, armed with an expanded moveset and new weapons. There are all manner of fantastical, well-designed and downright beautiful levels in Dark Souls 3, like the whole of the painted world of Ariandel and Archdragon Peak, but the one which sets the standard for me is Lothric Castle, and I'm also a really big fan of the High Wall of Lothric, which lies just below. Sadly, there is a particular level which in my mind falls well below this standard, and that's the Demon Ruins, located below the catacombs of Carthus and accessible via the Smouldering Lake. It is of course a callback to the Demon Ruins of the first Dark Souls, which also wasn't really a great level, but here it's far worse, to the point where it feels rushed and superfluous. FromSoft even pulled a weird move here and put the area boss, the old Demon King, at the very start of the level instead of the end, and in fact, your only real reward for reaching the end of the ruins is to turn off the giant crossbow thing that fires at you whilst you're trying to pick up loot from the lake. Most of the enemies found in the Demon Ruins are just taken from other areas too, apart from these Demon Clerics, who I consider to be one of the most obnoxious enemies in the game thanks to their relentless fireball fuckery. But other than that, be prepared to fight lots of Grues, Basilisks and Skeletons. All that could be forgiven though if it weren't for how copy and pasted the level feels. It's just a load of identical looking corridors, and halls and pits and invisible walls, and the main point of difficulty when traversing through it really does come from the fact that everything looks the bloody same. And this is weird considering how finely tailored so many of the game's other levels feel. The Demon Ruins is pretty much the only area I really don't look forward to on any given playthrough, to the extent that I sometimes just skip it altogether, making a beeline for the boss and then getting the hell out of there. Throughout my YouTube career, I've made no secret of the fact that I consider Bloodborne to be the greatest of all Soulsborne games, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the greatest ever games, period. I adore pretty much everything about it, and in particular the dark, eldritch and cosmic horror themes of the game do so much to elevate it above the already fascinating lore found in FromSoft's other games. but the levels themselves are where these themes and horrors are realised as you pass through the dark eerie halls of Upper Cathedral Ward, or the shrieking smoky haze of Hemwick Charnel Lane, or the twisted landscapes of the Hunter's Nightmare. Everywhere oozes with this thick flavour of blood, beasts and terror, and god damn it if Bloodborne isn't one of the most delightfully, darkly atmospheric games I've ever played. I love it. As such, it was damn hard for me to pick favourites, but in the end, turns out I'm a bit of a basic bitch, because I have to give it to Central Yharnam. This introductory level is simply too damn strong for me to not include here, and it does everything right. Structurally, the whole area is a dream, having a plethora of shortcuts and unlikely connections to other sections of the larger level. Beyond the actual layout though, it's the overwhelming threat and hostility of the place that really does it for me. Right as you enter, you have roaming gangs of villagers on the lookout for beasts and outsiders, despite the fact that they're all half beasts themselves and utterly insane. Even the NPCs here, interactable from behind their incense-lit doors, are just plain mean, and clearly not right in the head. Thankfully, there is the soothing Scottish tones of Gilbert, who has a far more refined accent than I, and is one of the only nice folk left in Yharnam. I sure hope nothing happens to him. This starting area is hard too, especially for a first time player. That starting bit with about 15 damn villagers huddled around the flaming corpse of some large beast is a proper trial by fire, and an excellent introduction to the kind of unforgiving, fast-paced challenge found throughout the game. And then you've got the sewers, complete with totally different enemy types, and then there's the optional challenge of the cleric beast for some extra blood echoes and insight, all leading up to a battle with one of the coolest characters in all of Soulsborne, Father Gascoigne. Bloodborne goes to some wild places later on, especially in the DLCs, and I came pretty close to putting the research hall as my favourite, but Central Yharnam simply has to win. It always hypes me the hell up for the rest of this awesome game. Before I tell you my pick for least favourite level, let me clarify that I don't think there are any bad levels in Bloodborne. I like them all, and please understand that my pick is simply one that I still do enjoy to some extent, but less so compared to all other levels in the game. It's Old Yharnam. Old Yharnam is technically an optional level, same with a surprising number of levels in Bloodborne, and it's very big with lots to see, ranging from the smouldering ruins of the lost city at the beginning to the section closer to the church where the blood-starved beast awaits, populated by shrieking beasts and stalking werewolves. There's a lot of cool stuff to see here, and it all has its own distinct ambience, but here's the thing, I just don't like playing through it all that much, and I don't exactly know why. I actually have the same feelings about the undead settlement from Dark Souls 3 too, which is a great area on paper, but which just doesn't do it for me when I actually play through it. I wish I could tell you exactly why, but I can't because I don't know. Maybe it's the whole getting blasted by a damn Gatling gun at the beginning aspect, which I'm not a fan of, because I don't like having to frantically run through areas. I like to take my time and pick shit up. But yeah, there you have it. I don't dislike Old Yharnam, I'm just not as big a fan of it as the other levels. Compared to the other games, Sekiro doesn't have quite as many distinct locations, but the ones it does have tend to be far more expansive in comparison, and of course, due to the inclusion of the shinobi prosthetic grappling hook, the feel of the levels differs greatly from every other Soulsborne title, giving the player significantly more space and verticality to work with, and there are other unique features here too, like ledges and tall grass, to facilitate the game's tight, satisfying stealth mechanics. And although Elden Ring would feature a dedicated jump button, Sekiro did it first. And then there's the whole swimming aspect too, which comes into play quite a bit in levels like Fountainhead Palace and Mibu Village. Speaking of Fountainhead Palace, I came very close to choosing it as my favourite, because it really is one of the most beautiful levels of any FromSoft game, absolutely bursting with a transcendent character and colour, which is complemented perfectly by a beautiful soundtrack. However, as lovely as the level is to look at and how good it is to play through, I don't really love playing through it, and to be honest, traversing through parts of it can be a bit of a pain in the arse. As such, I'm going to do that thing again where I default to picking a castle, Ashina Castle to be precise. The first part of the level begins with an infiltration into the castle through an open window, and this is where you really feel like a shinobi, grappling from rooftop to rooftop, taking care of those annoying nightjar enemies, not to mention that mental kamikaze fuck who comes out of nowhere. It's the interior of the castle that I really love though, because while there are no armoured knights and dragons present, there's the next best thing: samurai. These dudes are so sick. I absolutely love their slow, deliberate movesets, from their Ichimonji overhead strikes to their thrust perilous attacks. Their general design and the way they slowly patrol throughout the upper section of the castle just gives them a great presence and always makes me look forward to reaching this level, creeping around or grappling up above the ceiling. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of proper navigation required once inside the castle, but it doesn't matter. It's like Hyde's Tower of Flame. I just like being here. For my worst pick, just like was the case with Bloodborne, I don't consider any of Sekiro's areas to actually be bad, but there are ones I don't especially look forward to. To be honest, I'd love to just not choose any entry here, but I will choose one. I will choose Mibu Village. Mibu Village is actually really cool in many ways, and has a very creepy backstory, even having some similarities to Bloodborne with how all the villagers went mad and experienced weird transformations, though in this case it's from drinking the rejuvenating waters rather than by imbibing the old blood. The lead up to the level is very misty and ghostly and atmospheric, thick with apparitions, monkeys and cock. It's the village itself though that I don't really enjoy playing through all that much, and a part of that actually goes back to one of my areas of disdain for Old Yarnum. It's because you're heavily encouraged to just run past everything here due to how the villagers simply resurrect after death, and in some places enemies even perform these annoying grab attacks at your feet, and the result is that whenever I get to this admittedly interesting location, I usually just want to run through it, grab the treasures on the way and then hit the sculptor's idol without fighting anything, which isn't really how I'd like to engage with the level. Nonetheless, like I said, it's not bad, just not ideal as far as my own preferences. Now, on to the last game in this series. Now, while Sekiro changed the levels up a bit with its own distinct gameplay elements, Elden Ring brought its own changes, being the first open world Soulsborne game with distinct regions filled with points of POIs of interest, legacy dungeons, minor dungeons, field bosses and loads of other stuff, but for the purposes of this video I'm only going to be looking at either legacy dungeons or locations which operate in a similar fashion to it, like Caria Manor and Castle Sol, etc. The legacy dungeons really are where the level design is allowed to shine in Elden Ring, changing up the pace from the more open landscapes of the lands between, and being much higher in quality when compared to the game's many tunnels, caves and catacombs. I remember enjoying the hell out of my initial wanderings of Limgrave and being very impressed at the scale of the world, but then I got to Stormveil Castle and I fell off my chair. I just about chose Stormveil Castle too, because as well as being a massive intricate level, it's also a damn castle, that's my shtick. But for as stellar a level as it is, there was one just a bit more deserving, and how could I not pick it? It's Leyndell, Royal Capital. Right from the outset, Leyndell seeks to enchant with its sheer golden scale, the sombre soundtrack, and the weird but strangely beautiful herald enemies complementing the soundtrack with their soft piping. I'm sure everyone remembers that first moment where you enter the city and take it all in and wonder, holy shit, can I actually explore all that? Well, yes, you can, and that's one of the things that makes Leyndell so special. It's really big, there is loads to find, and you can damn well get lost in it. And it may not be a castle, but there are sure as hell plenty of formidable knights to fight, not to mention a random Erdtree avatar that falls out of the sky. All through the game up until this point, you can see the Erdtree standing several times higher than everything else, distant, incandescent and seemingly untouchable, but then you get to Altus Plateau and all of a sudden it's looking a great deal bigger and a hell of a lot closer, and then once you set foot in Leyndell, and especially as you climb higher up to the Erdtree Sanctuary and beyond, the tree's true enormity comes into full view, and it's all so wonderfully done. It's such a subtle, yet at the same time blatant measure of the player's progress through the first half of the game, and I know many players mistakenly thought they might even be coming to the end of the game once getting to Leyndell, and no wonder when you consider the sheer scale and quality of the experience here. Definitely one of the greatest Soulsborne levels and filled with special moments like climbing up the impossibly large wing of Gransax and when you enter into the actual Round Table Hold, not to mention the emotions that arise when all of this is later crushed and scorched by the player's own actions. For worst area, well, it happens to be a level lying very close to Leyndell itself. In fact, it lies directly beneath it. It's the subterranean shunning grounds. Despite how much of Leyndell has fallen to ruin, madness and death since the shattering, there's still an undeniable lingering splendour to it all, but none of that splendour is present down in the shunning grounds, being the dark depths where omens were kept, unwanted ogres set to go against the Golden Order, thus having no place amongst normal people, and certainly no place in the royal capital. It all makes sense thematically, and hey, I love the shunning grounds conceptually, but what I do not enjoy is actually playing through this level. It is dark, expansive, labyrinthine, confusing, dangerous, and frankly, kinda bloody miserable. There's actually a lot of importance to this level, being where the Dung Eater can be found, hosting 2 minor dungeons, one of which is notorious for fucking with the player's head, and there's a boss fight with a projection of Moog, beyond which lies the Frenzied Flame. Even so, the area is just not very fun for me, and I've even been known to get frustrated and turn to a guide for directions on where the hell to go after finding myself hopelessly lost in the pipe system. The Shunning Grounds is a level I always play through because of its importance to the larger game, but I never particularly enjoy it, certainly not when compared to Leyndell just above, or the game's other legacy dungeon type areas like the Academy of Rhea Lucaria, Deeproot Depths, or even the Lake of Rot. Yeah, I kind of like the Lake of Rot, at least it's bright. And folks, there's my list. I know there might have been some weird choices in there, and that's because for some of the games I just don't really dislike any of their levels. But despite that, there's always a hierarchy of quality in anyone's mind, and I have presented mine. Please let me know what your picks for favourite and least favourite are down in the comments. I really enjoyed reading everyone's lists in the comments for my boss video. Also, please allow me to give a final thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel, and on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers for watching and cheerio.